on the slippery slopes of association roofing. I'd like to start by adding more people into our waiting room. Awesome. Beautiful. Matt, will you help me with the waiting room? Beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. Wonderful. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Nickerson with Unlimited Restoration, and we want to say thank you all for joining us this morning. A few housekeeping things before we get started. There is a chat box at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions throughout this conversation, please enter your questions into the chat, and we will make sure that we get those throughout the presentation and do a live Q&A at the end. This will also be recorded and sent to everybody on this call after. Please feel free to share that with any of your property managers or board members that could not be here on this call. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the record button, and we will get started.
Recording in progress.
Beautiful. So good morning again, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the Slippery Slope of Association Roofing. My name is Erin Nickerson with the Unlimited Restoration, URI, and I will be moderating this conversation. And I'd like to start by introducing our speakers. Paul Amara with Rosenbaum PLLC.
Hi, thank you, and thank you all for joining us today. It should be an interesting panel, and we look forward to the questions that you all have. And I think, again, Erin will be monitoring a chat box, so definitely send your questions that way. We find that when they are asked, it will develop more of a context for really what is interesting to the participants in this chat today. And overall, again, thank you for joining us. Look forward to hearing from you all with questions. It is a slippery slope. I like the title of this particular webinar because things are changing. Matt, and I know Kyle will have some things to add as well with respect to what we are doing both for condo and HOA. So different subjects overall, but thank you again for joining. Rosenbaum, we're a full service firm. Katie Phillips, education director, she's not with us today, but she has over 27 years of management experience, that she is our education director for our association group. It's myself, Steve Brayton, and also Stephanie Galloway that lead our group here at Rosenbaum. We do everything from just corporate representation to amendments, enforcement, etc. So thank you again, all of you, for attending.
Awesome. And I'd like to introduce next Matt Reedy with Plastridge Insurance.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. Matt Reedy with Plastridge. If you're not familiar with Plastridge, we're a 105-year-old privately held agency based out of Delray Beach. When they installed the phone lines in Delray Beach, we had the phone number 1. And today we represent about 1,300 condos, HOAs, and co-ops, primarily here in South Florida. So again, thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. And I'd like to next introduce Kyle Nerman with Total Roofing Solutions.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. My name is Kyle Nerman. I've been in the commercial roofing industry for going over 20 years now. I've worked for 3 of the top 15 national roofing companies. So portfolio management and multi-residential has been my area of expertise over the majority of my career, specifically here in Florida. So I'm with Total Roofing Systems, the metal roof experts out of Stuart, Florida, where we cover everywhere from Melbourne down to Miami on a residential level, and statewide on multi-residential and commercial, specifically on metal panel retrofitting. So that's what our clear line of focus is, but we are very expert installers in tile as well, because we're so production oriented. So the larger tile projects like communities, a lot of the HOAs and associations out there, we do very well with on the production side. So that's why we're here today, and that's why we're involved in this conversation. I'm looking to learn as much from you guys as hopefully you may learn from me. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kyle. And again, my name is Erin Nickerson with Unlimited Restoration. We are a licensed general contractor that specializes in fire, water, mold, emergency situations, including roofing solutions. So let's get started. So there's a lot of different types of roofs, and the roof is often a shared component in community associations, condominiums, and co-ops for sure have a shared roof, and many HOAs where there is a shared roof, a shared party wall, also have to be a shared roofing structure. They're built-up roofs, modified bitumen roofs, single-ply membrane, gabled roof, mansards, etc., and they can be covered with metal, tile, shingle, asphalt, cedar shake, etc. So, Kyle, I want to start with you. Why don't you explain the differences in the types of roof and where you often most see them?
Well, like you just said, you just pretty much went through the list of them all. And a lot of these associations and communities are different. On flat roof membranes, we're flat roofing. We can have anything from built-up asphalt. We have self-adherent products, and we have single-ply systems. So some are more durable than others under high traffic. So a lot of high-rises have higher wind velocities and the requirements, and a lot of penetrations and a lot of traffic in that little bit of area. So we tend to go with those built-up roof surfaces a lot more than single-plies. If we do single plies, they can be really redundant as well, as long as they're fully adhered in those high wind situations. And that leads us pretty much to the slope roofing. Obviously, most predominant here in Southeast Florida is the basic shingle, but tile and metal seem to lead the market. Majority associations or tract home apartments tend to be more affordable. We're going with the shingles. And the architecture, higher end architecture, tends to lean toward tile. But as we're learning through the storm seasons and everything, we're learning about the benefits of metal all the way around. We're working with insurance companies, obviously, for the benefits of metal to help protect the assets that they're covering. So metal is we just finished the 2024 FRSA. That's the Florida Roofing and Sheet Metal Association Contractors Convention up in Orlando last week. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Everything in market is really going toward metal here in Florida. So they're all really, where do we find them? Like I said, you can find metal anywhere from your multi-residential lower income to your high income out on the islands with an aluminum coating, with an aluminum system. So, and tile is pretty much your mid-range to upper range residential and multi-residential. And then your shingles are pretty much, like I said, your most affordable for the new construction. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. We spend a lot of time assessing communities' needs, budgets, forecasting, turnover, a lot of stuff we're going to discuss here that really determine which roof system is best for the overall situation in any unique set of circumstances. Every community is different. Every architecture is different. Every exposure to the ocean or to the winds or hail, they all got to come into consideration. So there's a lot to consider. It's really not clear cut.
Well, there's a lot of different roofing materials depending on building type, and in a perfect world, the association maintains and replaces the roofs when there's a shared roofing system, right? Well, in condos and co-ops, but that's most always the case, right? It's one of the main structural components of the building, and the association is reserving the replacement and replacing on a schedule. But in HOA land, this is not quite the case. So, Paula, can you tell us about our HOAs where there are shared roofs in different types of ways the association can know what their obligations are and how the HOA goes about maintaining and then repairing?
Yes, it's a really important topic to cover for HOAs that have a shared roofing system. You're talking about your HOAs that are townhomes or quads or villas, and there are variations with respect to the declarations, either going to provide one of two things, basically. It's going to either provide that the owner is responsible for his or her roof, the roof over their unit. I'm going to call it a unit, even though it's a single-family townhome or villa. Or alternatively, the declaration will provide that the association maintains and insures the roof. Or it even could provide kind of a subset of that. It's the association maintains the roof but doesn't insure the roof, which is a new creation of additional problems that we have for our HOAs that have a shared roofing system. The shared roofing system also, for some older villas or older townhomes, they may not have the party wall that runs all the way up to the entire roofing system, which changes things as well. But ultimately, the bottom line is this. The declaration is going to govern how your HOA either maintains and insures or just maintains. And all of these types of things can become problematic because if you're maintaining the roof and insuring the roof, it's probably a more simplified linear approach to insurance overall. You're going to be able to, as an HOA, maintain the roof, which means replacing the roof when you need to replace it for your commercial policy. Because if you're insuring the roof, you're most likely insuring the entire quad structure or the exterior of the townhome structure. But ultimately, if you're not, if you just have an insurance obligation, which I have a few clients in this situation, but the owner is going to be replacing the roof, you get into a big problem that you have to approach very timely to make sure that the owners are replacing the roof according to what your insurance carrier is going to be requiring. And unfortunately, sometimes in that context, you only know 6 months in advance. So I have a couple clients in that situation. For that, I always recommend that the association review their governing documents, especially just after turnover, to make sure that the insurance obligation, the maintenance obligation is consistent with each other, because you will run into legal problems ultimately, especially in this market, and I'll let Matt speak to that, but in this market with respect to insurance. So if you're an HOA, if you're a standard HOA, you have single family homes, of course you're not insuring the roof. A couple things with that you have to think about. As Kyle mentioned, you have the trend that is definitely going towards the metal roofing system because the insurance carriers are going to cover that for a longer period of time. So, for example, even in my own neighborhood, we have barrel tile, Mediterranean tile style homes, but everyone who has, it's like 22 years now, these roofs. So now everyone is trending and going towards the metal roofs. So you'll want to make sure that your architectural guidelines for those single family homes where you're going to allow the metal roofs, my recommendation is you have your ARC guidelines and standards that address the metal roofs. If you're going to require them to not be just the, I hate to say the barn style color roof, you're going to require the colors to be added. Make sure your ARC guidelines are ahead of this trend, because you're going to, if you're going from the barrel tile into the metal style, which most owners will encourage the board to adopt those types of standards, get ahead of it so you can at least have the standards that match something with respect to a color palette, etc. That's for just single family. But again, for the shared roofing system, make sure that you're aware of what your declaration requires. That is going to be the guideline that the association has to follow, both with maintenance and insurance. If you have insurance and maintenance that are separate from each other, again, the owners are maintaining, but the association is insuring, it is very problematic to create the maintenance program and the repair program and ultimately the replacement program, so that you can continue to have your insurance policy, which is that commercial policy.
Thank you, Paula. That's a little complicated, and
It is complicated for sure. Yeah.
And I live in the Devasta Quad, so this is a very real conversation for me. And the biggest thing that you just said that I wanted to touch back on was the conversation with not only your attorney but your agent. I think is really important, so you are going down the right path to doing the right thing according to your documents and getting ahead, like Paula said, of the new trend of going to metal roofs is a huge topic of conversation. But it's a conversation between your attorney, your board, and your insurance agent. So, Matt, how does the association insurance look at the maintenance obligation versus the insurance obligation, and what are your recommendations?
So I've got a line I usually start a lot of my CE classes with. When it helps when we're in first, because you can't raise hands on a webinar, but I usually go, okay, where are my co-ops in the room? I get one person out of 100 that raises a hand. Where are my condos in the room? And I'll get about half the room. And I just go, where are my HOAs in the room? Get a few more. Where are my HOAs insured like condos? And I usually pause there and say, you are the ones that keep me up at night, because there are so many different X factors that change how we're going to have to evaluate. Condo is easy. Condo, we have in the Florida Statute 718, says the association maintains X, the association insures X, and then the owner is responsible for the others. For the HOA statute 720, it says, well, what do your bylaws say? And when basically my interpretation, I mean, Paul, correct me if you disagree. My summarization of the HOA statute is when they write that, they think of specifically single family home, and they don't think at all about quads, duplexes, my townhome communities. I lived in a townhome community where I had 6 different residences under one shared roof, and the association actually maintained that roof, but I had to insure it. And so when you have the HOAs and it's subject to the governing documents, there's so many different ways it can go wrong. Where I've had the communities where owners are responsible for maintaining the roofs, but the association has to insure it. And where that can go horribly wrong is when you have 3 unit owners left in the community who refuse to replace a 40-year-old roof, and everybody else has a new one. And now the community who's responsible for buying the insurance can't get the policy because of 4 holdouts on the roof systems. It's complicated too, where the community is maintaining it, but then the unit owners are choosing to insure it, because then there's no standard of consistency on what are you insuring it for, what are your deductibles, do people even have policies if they have no mortgage? So, go back to my example, I had 6 different homes under one roof. We could have had 6 different insurance companies with 6 different deductibles, with 6 different limits of insurance. And when we had that claim, it would have been an absolute nightmare to handle that from an adjusting standpoint. So I really do mean it that the HOAs that just subject to what your bylaws say are the ones that keep you up at night, because it's also up to how the attorney worded what the responsibilities are 30, 40 years ago when they wrote the documents originally. And I have so many different variations where I don't think any 2 communities in the same, similar situation, the documents even read the same, because it all depends on how it was written. So there's a lot of different ways. Condo's a lot easier because you have the standard of consistency on the Florida statute, what it requires, what the unit owner has, what the association's required to carry.
It's a little complicated as well.
There's
So,
a lot of variations. Every time
Right.
you change one piece of the cog or one piece of the machine, it changes everything.
So what about the associations where nothing is covered by the HOA? The maintenance and replacement as well as the insurance is on the owner. Kyle, can an owner, let's say in a quad, replace their quarter of the roof without the others completing their section? And this may be a Kyle and a Paula question.
Sorry about that, I was muted. Actually, your Boston quad situation is the driving force behind my concerns throughout my career. It's particularly in Southeast Florida. I've seen them prosper, and I've seen them leveled. Unfortunately, so these the Boston quads, if nobody's familiar, they're pretty much like Big X, and they have duplex, 2-story townhomes in each corner. Everybody has their own corner quad. Mansard roof all the way around, and then flat roof on top. And the way these are designed, they're usually over concrete deck or wood deck. The problem with the wood roofing is that building under new construction eventually settles under all the pressure of the AC units, and the weight, and all the plumbing, and all the electric, all the utilities go in the center of the roof. So it tends to sag in the center. So you get all this drainage that's meant to go to the outside around these pretty mansards. Then how that drainage flows. One owner might have it pouring down their mansard. One might have a proper through wall drainage. But the biggest concern with these types is that everything flows to the center, especially on the wood decks. And on the concrete, same kind of thing. If you get one unit that's got a bad roof, you can coat it. You can coat your roof, but there's no separation. All 4 quads are under one flat roof. So there's 2 main concerns here. Obviously, there is a way to separate those flat roofs, but it involves putting a control joint completely down the center of somebody else's section to the deck and sealing that roof system. Really, the only way to get a warranty on your roof system is to penetrate all the way down to the deck of the substrate, whether it's concrete or whether it's wood, and separate your roof system from your neighbor's. Problem is, you have to cut into your neighbor's roof system to do that. Okay, and then who's responsible for tying that back into that control joint? And if that goes wrong, who's going to cover that? So it's a very messy situation. I've never really seen it work out. I've always encouraged investors that if you're going to buy a Boston Quad, make sure you buy all four. And there's a property value issue. People that don't see the flat roofs, they still see the mansards when they're purchasing. So if the HOA has no control over what these mansards look like, someone can have shingles, someone can have a stone coated steel, another one can have a regular mill finish 5V metal, and it's really patchy and blotchy, and they don't tie into one another, and it drives down property value. So we have seen, like I said, there's the Boston Quad communities. There's one in Stewart. They're doing really well. They've managed everything cohesively. Their mansards, they have top-notch mansards. They did nice stone-coated steel mansards. Redid all the flats at once. Of course, all those owners were responsible for bringing up their own units up to par, putting them up on stands and not sitting on the roofs anymore. You can't have them on sleepers in today's wind standards. But that community has all screened enclosures around their courtyards. They have beautiful fencing everywhere, high maximum lease rates, and highest quality value. However, when in the others, if you just north of downtown Palm Beach, along the lake there, I think is one that's been recently completely demolished. You just watch it degrade over the last 10 years, and I think a couple of years ago it just finally disappeared. But anybody who initially invested in that area, that investment's just lost. So that's why I'm really interested to hear, there is really no way on those types of roof systems. You have the up and over types, say a track, the next situation would be like track homes, okay? Or even split villas, duplexes, where the roofs come together. Tile, one neighbor wants to go to metal, or one neighbor just wants to update their tile but not their metal. The same problem happens, is that you're tying into an old roof system, and you have to stand on that roof system to work on the other. So you're already looking at an aged roof. Now, who's responsible for damaging the aged roof? Hey, I thought I had another 10 years. You may have had another 5 years left on your roof system, but my neighbor got proactive, and their roofer stomped all over my roof and created more leaks. And so what that ends up doing, and I've presented this on many podcasts on AskARoofer.com and Roofer's Coffee Shop about, you're basically you're costing 30 to 40% more on each roof section, and over the long haul, and you're limiting your lifespan for about up to 10 years on a regular roof system life. So a roof that might be 20, 25 years is now 10 to 15 because of the traffic going on left and right of it. So it's a very complicated situation, just like this. And I'm asked all the time about moving to Florida and what to consider when moving into an HOA. And these are the things. Just look in your bylaws. And another thing I'm hoping to learn about more today is the responsibility of the board to help make those decisions along the way. I spent a lot of time meeting with tile communities, as you say, Paula, that are looking to go metal, and advising them that there's a wide range of metal. You can put really cheap metal in there and hurt your overall property value. You can do a couple selections that give them some options, but at least they maintain the overall character of the community. So those are all individual conversations to be had. And I can talk about it all day, but I know we're on time here, so I'll slow down for now.
Well, Kyle, thank you for making me feel so good about living in a domestic quad. Paula, I want to talk about when we have people that are not going to replace their roof when it should be replaced. Is there a way that the association can compel those owners to do so? And what happens when a roofer causes damage to a neighboring roof like Kyle was talking about? How do we go about getting that rectified?
So there is a way to compel an owner to replace the roof, and that is unfortunately to pay me to compel them to replace the roof, which again is the last place any association really wants to be in. I say that kind of facetiously, but it's true. We have, again, this scenario of Matt calling you and telling the association you're insuring the roofs, but you're not replacing or maintaining them. And we have 4 months to get what I actually kind of coined, nobody can steal it from me, but boots on the roof. Back to Kyle's point too, because what we have is a time frame to have any of those owners in short notice. You're not going to be covered if you do not have a contract, or those particular owners, as you say, Aaron, that are responsible to replace that roof. If you don't have a contract, then the association overall is not going to be covered for insurance. So now you're forcing individual owners to actually reply, respond, enter into a contract individually, as opposed to the association entering into a contract for the entirety of the roofs. The best quad villas or townhomes that you can basically be in is if you have an insurance obligation. Again, a takeaway point overall is this for HOAs, and I know we're going to shift to condos just for our condo listeners today. But the takeaway point is this: if you have a quad villa townhome, you want to have the insurance and the maintenance together. You don't want them separate because it creates so many different problems. So you ask the question of what do you have to do? As for those older associations that are shared connected roofs, you would basically need to obtain an injunction. And I always say that an injunction is going to court and asking the judge to order an individual to do something. And when we talk about emergency injunctions, I always use the example, if you're not bleeding out, literally, you're probably not going to get an emergency injunction. You'll have to go through the court process to file and then wait for the hearing, etc. And by that time, your carrier has dropped you because you don't have all the replacements of those roofs for that particular building, quad, townhome section. So it is important, and for any listener today that has a new turnover scenario or a recent turnover from the developer, my suggestion is always to look at your roof maintenance and insurance obligation and amend your documents before anyone has to replace their own roof. Because when you go beyond that, when people have replaced their roofs or not replaced their roofs, you have to amend your documents, and you have to basically work with the quilt patchwork of owners who have replaced and owners who have not. And then you're shifting that to a common expense versus not a common expense. But there are ways to do that. And my recommendation is if you are in one of those quads, HOA, villas, townhomes, consult with your counsel, legal counsel, and find a way to get to where you're matching up your maintenance and repair replacement obligation with your insurance obligation. Or you're disengaging the insurance obligation and you're going insurance for each particular piece. But as Kyle mentioned, there's so many different issues when you're having a shared roof, depending on your roof style. And then ultimately, Katie and I always talk about 2004, 2005, when you do have the individual insurance obligation for each townhome or even a villa, every owner is engaging their own carrier for a replacement. And you're going to be living with a blue tarp or not for a long time. So if you are in one of those HOAs where the roofing is shared, townhome, villa, quad, even a flat roof is a whole different scenario where I would suggest that you certainly look at the maintenance, repair, replacement to be an association obligation. Make it consistent. I think that's the main takeaway point for our HOAs today.
I have one last question for you, Matt, on this before we jump into condo land. So if we get a storm, we're in storm season right now, we're all preparing. If we get a storm and there's hurricane damage, who does the work and who pays for the work to get done when you have a shared roofing system?
We have the shared roofing system, and the association had the responsibility to insure it. I guess in either way, it depends on if does the association have the maintenance requirement. If the policy is in the association's name, they're going to be the one quarterbacking the claim. When the claim gets paid, the named insured is going to be the actual association. From there, on my end, I typically hand it off to the attorneys to figure out exactly how the funds are dispersed and who pays who. But from the insurance perspective, at least you have the situation where the individual company is going to be handling the claim. The single company, not go back to the 6 different townhomes under one roof. At least you have the one adjuster who's going to be handling it from A to Z, make the payment to the association. The association has the funds. I'll let the attorneys be the one who says, well, okay, who handles the individual contracts from there. But I guess it can kind of be a mixed bag depending on bylaws as well. What would you say, Paula?
Yeah, so I think just ultimately, when it is an association insured roof, the consistency is there, and then you have, again, the common interest for your community is obviously to have the shared roofs repaired, replaced after a storm, after an event. So you don't have that patchwork happening. But what we see, as Kyle mentioned, what we see out there is, I think, Matt, you're the one that said it, like keeps you up at night, because when a shared roof community comes to us and we look at it and we try to change it even to amend the documents to make it more consistent for the practicality of storm events, replacement, insurance, etc., it can become quite complicated. But there are a lot of different variations out there, and the governance is pursuant to your declaration. So you'll see the 70s, late 70s, 80s, 90s, into the 2000s trending different ways. And I will say, if you're a recent turnover community, you will see that most likely, especially in a townhome community, the individual owners are responsible for the repair, replacement, and the insurance of their roof. And that is because developers are pretty smart, and they have trended towards not having an obligation towards the roofs, because in a turnover situation, you're going to have turnover claims or developer defect claims. And so if they're not responsible for the roof, guess what? The roofs are not part of that claim. So most likely, if you are more recent, even 2002, 2004, 2005 and beyond, if you're in a townhome situation, you're not going to find the developer put into your declaration that the association is responsible for your roofs. That's because it would be a possible turnover claim. So when you have a turnover, or you have even something that in the late, even mid-2000s, amend your governing documents back to the consistency of the association insures and maintains the roof. That's usually going to be my recommendation, unless you look a little bit different with respect to the style of your townhome or villas or quads.
Mac, if I could clarify one thing from your standpoint, it's always been my understanding that whoever carries the insurance at the time of the incident has the primary obligation to mediate the situation first, to prevent more damage. So if between owners and one owner's lacking and his roof is leaking and the other, but on the HOA level, no matter whoever can get there first to mediate it as fast as possible is who the roofer contractor works with on site on emergency response. Now that doesn't ensure that, for those of you listening, that in the communities, that doesn't obligate you if you have a roofer relationship or whatever. It's really the best interest of the community to mediate the situation first, and it's the responsibility of insurance to implement that, or you may compromise your coverage. Maybe you can clarify that, Matt, but obviously from that point, you're not committed to the contractor that came out there and did the emergency repairs. Now you can go through a bid process for the overall re-roofing or maintenance from that point forward. Can you clarify that for me, Matt?
Yeah, so that's a really excellent point. And Matt, I'll let you jump in after I'm done, of course. Just kidding.
So go ahead.
You get some laughs. Just kidding, right? But no, to cut. That's an excellent point, because what I really want to. This is probably something just to kind of drive home. If you are an HOA that is insuring the roofs, as the board, you have an obligation to make sure that day one you have the carrier adjusting the roof damage, and you are actually then securing that particular damage so that no other damage results from that casualty event. In other words, if you have a casualty event and it damages one portion of the roof, but you, as a board, your insurance, even though if you don't have maintenance or repair obligation for that roof, but you do have the insurance obligation, you will step in immediately. And even if you have to contact Aaron because there's water damage inside the unit, that is the association's obligation. And you want to make sure that you take care of that immediately and secure it until you can call Kyle and he can come out and start your roof replacement under your adjustment from your carrier. And then Matt jump in for that.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. If you have the policy, whether it's your own individual policy, this is good to know, or as an association, you carry the policy. Part of that is you have a duty to prevent further damage. So if there's roof damage, if there's water intrusion somewhere, you have a duty in that policy to prevent that from getting worse. So I always use an example where a client who was it was a condominium, but it was a rental community mostly. Most of the people who lived in there didn't actually own units, and so you had the owners were more disconnected. The association was also not in a good financial position. After Hurricane Irma, they had significant water damage coming through the roof, and they said they didn't have the money to hire the roofer to put the tarp up. So we helped them get in contact with FEMA, a couple other organizations that could have given them the tarps for free, and then they came back saying, well, you know, the ACs are up there, so it's impossible to put up tarp. I said, well, is it impossible, or is it just going to be really difficult? I said, well, it's going to be difficult. At the end of the day, they ended up not spending the money with a roofer to put the tarp up because allegedly they didn't have the money. And a couple weeks later, they had tenants inside the unit making calls to the health department because the sheetrock was so saturated with moisture that the roof was literally falling down into the unit. They had, you know, a severe mold issue. They ended up having a really, really ugly claim. A lot of it ended up getting denied because they did not take the proper steps on the front end to prevent further damage. They had the roof damage, they had water intrusion, that was all expected from a major hurricane, but there were a lot of things that they skipped on the back end to prevent it from getting even worse, and that made it a litigated nightmare on that particular claim.
I always think it's important to keep in mind your insurance or your condo or your HOA shared roofs. It is a contract. So it's not just you have a reduction of risk liability and something's going to happen and you're going to be covered. It's not just that. You have to go to the next step, as Matt just explained. It is a contract, and you have obligations on the association side too, to mitigate damages, to move right in with respect to mitigating those damages, doing things to prevent further damage, or you will not have coverage for those further damages. So keep that in mind. It is a contract. There's obligations on both sides. The carrier has obligations, yes, but the association has obligations as well. So all of those types of things, I mean, there's an entire industry of attorneys that work on these types of issues, which tells you it is a contract. So understand the give and take between your contract with your carrier, what you need to do when an event happens, and how you need to mitigate those damages. Because rightfully so, arguably, the carrier will potentially fine you if you've done the exact example that Matt just gave you. So just please understand that, because I think a lot of my board members just believe that it's covered, it's an event, and it's going to be covered, and that's just not how it works.
I love that you guys are talking about my favorite topic, which is storm season, hurricane, and water damage. And I
You're going to say water damage.
Oh, I love it. I love water damage. But besides that, it's important to have the conversation prior to us going into hurricane season at a board level, at an association level. And I find that the associations that have this conversation in town hall meetings with their residents that really take the time to explain the why it is so important to have insurance policies, not just at the association level, but at the individual unit owner level, regardless of whether you have a mortgage or not, is so important. I don't think we talk about the benefits of having an individual policy, especially when we get into condo and co-op land, but especially for any shared living situation under one roof, it would be silly of you not to do that at this point. We get a strong wind on a Tuesday afternoon like today, and you could potentially have water damage issues in your unit. So that kind of takes me back over to condo and co-op land I want to talk about for a minute. They don't have like as big of a struggle to really find out who does the replacement and who does the maintenance for the roof, but I have been on a lot of roofs in Florida and I've seen a lot of bad roofs. So Kyle, what are your recommendations in pointing our condo and co-op land people on this call for replacing a roof? What are good practices, best practices, and what are the order of operations they should follow?
Well, here's where you learn that I consult with integrity, because Total Roofing does not have a proactive maintenance program. So, but it's been the bulk of my career has been driving and managing proactive maintenance for communities. So, first of all, if you do not have proactive service, proactive maintenance would be annual or biannual. And if you have a recent installation on your roof, a shared roof system that the HOA is responsible for. I encourage the boards to look into your warranty, look into the fine points of those warranty. If they say, responsible for maintenance as in maintenance plan, you won't get that maintenance plan unless you ask for it from the manufacturer. So you need to find out what the required maintenance is. Sometimes it's once a year, sometimes it's twice a year. Most often it's twice. And that includes not just, you'll have some proactive maintenance or an installer say, we'll give you free maintenance inspections for the first 5 years of our contract, try to seal the deal. But it's basically an inspection that may take photos of your roof and then tell you what's wrong and say, you're going to have to fix this, and give you like 4 or 5 different repair things. So here's $10,000 in repairs, or you're going to void your warranty. That's not that type of proactive maintenance program I'm talking about. I'm talking about an actual proactive maintenance plan. It does cost a little bit more because they include material specifically for that manufacturer on that roof system that's authorized and approved, and they're certified installers to maintain that type of roof surface. So it's not just any company. You want somebody that's certified and knowledgeable about that particular manufacturer that's going to use that manufacturer's materials on proactive maintenance. Now, on built-up roof systems like modified bitumen and asphalt, you have a lot of flexibility. But when it comes to single plies, the chemistry is different. And you have some people, if you have metal roofing, some people are putting asphalt on metal. It corrodes the metal. It's crisp, it's crunchy, it doesn't retain, it doesn't move with the metal. It actually promotes more condensation and more corrosion beneath the surface of the repair. So it actually does more to accelerate the degradation of your roof system. So I'm going to remind you all that to interview your proactive maintenance program providers very thoroughly and their overall knowledge of whatever roof system it is you have. They may have a good maintenance program, but that doesn't mean that they have a knowledge of maintaining single-ply roof systems if they're nothing but a shingle or tile company. They don't know how to maintain those types of roof systems. So you want to know you want to research proactive maintenance providers who are certified with the specific manufacturer that you have on your roof. When it's tile and shingle, it doesn't have to put your. On the contrary, if it's tile and shingle or even metal, it's not necessarily the manufacturer that's important. Okay, as it is on flat, but it is the knowledge, the capability. I mean, a lot of people ask us, "You're the metal roof experts. Can you do tile?" Actually, because we're the metal roof experts because we do the majority of installs for other companies in the area. Because we are a manufacturer and an installer, so we do it at manufacturing quality level with the install. But to be an expert in anything, you have to have knowledgeable working of everything else. And 50% of our market is still tile. So 10 Tarpon Isle, West Palm Beach, $218 million property, high slope concrete tile, we put that roof on. So you really have to get particular with your contractors. And there's roof consultants that are reputable in the area. If it's too broad and you're not getting, you don't feel like you're getting proper guidance, then you can hire a roof consultant. And on that topic, I hope I'm not taking too much time, just so give me a finger up if I'm talking too much. But it's really important that when an HOA invests in a roof consultant, that they think they have to go with that roof consultant's conclusion and advice. There may be a roofing company that does their own consultations and what they're best at. And that roof consultant is kind of looking at the broad spectrum of providers. And you have to keep in mind that everybody has their own interests. They have their own relationships. It's not biased. It's not negative. It's just business. We're on this forum together, us providers, because we know each other and we trust each other. We work together all the time. I consulted with Rosenbaum with this particular community that led to this entire conversation. It was an $8.5 million job if they keep it on the same track, and everybody's going to have 15-year roofs when they could go to 30, 40-year roofs and for $5.5 million if they just did it as a community. These are the conversations we're having. And I'm not sure if I got track there, but proactive maintenance is where it really starts, and don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. If you're getting consistent, you have to report those reports. A lot of times it goes to a community association manager, and the board's not getting those. Or you have somebody on your board who claims to be an expert roofer up in New York, and they're not down here. And this is a whole different animal. And you need to be keen to the expertise of those who have been in this particular industry, in this particular atmosphere for the last 10, 20 years when you're doing so.
Kyle, you hit on like 4 things that I want to emphasize, and the first one is the soapbox that I stand on. You need to vet your vendors. It is cowboy country down here, and especially South Florida for contracting in general. And I can guarantee you right now, if you ask Erin Nickerson, 5 of my clients, do I do good work, and could they give you a letter of recommendation, I would tell you absolutely yes. But now think about every single contractor that's on your property. Can you do the same with your landscaper, your roofer? All of those trades are really important that you do so, especially with what Kyle's talking about. A single family home roof is vastly different than a condominium building on a barrier island. So please make sure you are doing that. Ask for a letter of recommendation, a COI naming the association as an additional insured. God forbid they break something on your property and you have to call me for a flood that they caused. So those are the things that I think about that I like to share with you all. Ask for letters of recommendation. Paula, I feel like you wanted to say something on this.
No, I was just going to touch upon, just leading from where Kyle was coming from. Florida is not New York. Florida is not the Midwest. Florida is a different state altogether. I was going to throw in a Taylor Swift song. She has the new one out. It's called Florida. You should listen to it because it's kind of true. And for vendors, and even with respect to when you have a conversation about insurance, I have a lot of board members will say, well, my insurance in Rhode Island or Connecticut or New Jersey works like this. It's not the same. I'll let Matt speak to that. It's just not the same. And so you really have to understand, as a board member especially, be involved. You're here today, which is great with respect to the roofs. We're covering so much information, which tells you we could sit here for 8 hours and not even cover enough to give you the knowledge that your experts can give you. So certainly that's a takeaway point too. Rely upon your experts. Rely upon your agent. Rely upon your vendors that are trustworthy. They're out there 100%. You see some bad apples, but ultimately you have mostly really good guys down here that are also doing the work. But definitely vet them. If it's a small contract, like you say, Aaron, your soapbox is, certainly have your attorney, have a relationship with your attorney to say, it's not that big of a contract for this or that. But you always want to have a certificate of insurance. You always want to make sure they're insured and they're licensed in Florida. I could tell you, I always like the scary story thing. It's like we should have like a scary story panel where we can tell all of the horrible stories that we see on a day-to-day basis where I'm like, no, that did not just happen for that particular board. With respect to a vendor or with respect to not understanding how insurance works, or even how we have a chat box question with respect to what is the HO6 policy. We'll talk about that in a moment, I think. How does that work? Types of things. If you have one in Florida, by the way, you are not required to have a condominium. Aaron, you touched upon this just 5 or 6 minutes ago. You're not required by statute to have an HO6 policy, which is the policy that covers your drywall finish in to your unit. Like if you're looking at this, right? My beautiful picture. I got it at Home Goods. It's not worth that much money, but should the toilet leak upstairs from my unit and my beautiful Home Goods picture is destroyed, if I don't have an HO6 and the person above me doesn't have an HO6, you have personal liability, which is going to extend to you. So for a condominium unit owner, you are not required to have one unless your governing documents, your declaration requires you to have one. One of my recommendations for any of my condominium buildings is to require an HO6 policy. Scary story, real quick, and then I'll divert over to wherever. Your plumber comes and fixes a pipe, but doesn't do it the right way because he's not licensed and he wasn't supposed to be doing work in Florida anyway. He goes back to Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, I don't know, one of those states, maybe Missouri, maybe went back to Kansas City to the Chiefs games, I don't know. But bottom line is this, he caused $250,000 worth of damage to the elevator shafts. And that unit owner is now obligated, responsible legally for that damage. So that tells you why an HO6 policy would have at least supplemented into covering that particular damage for that leaky, that pipe that burst.
I actually had that happen in a building down the street from your office last week. I do want to talk about one last thing on insurance, and then we'll go into the group chat and answer everybody's questions. Matt, what are insurance companies looking for when they are talking about replacing condo roofs? So let's go beachside versus West Delray.
Oh boy, there's a lot of ways I could answer that because there's different types of roofs, different types of communities. I mean, my favorite attorney answer is it depends. If you've got flat roofs, it depends on, because it depends on which companies are actually looking at potentially underwriting policies. So the construction of the building that varies, but you can at least say this: Citizens, if you have flat roofs, thinks your roofs will be good for 15 years, but then you can get additional years of useful life approved if you can get a licensed roofer or a licensed general contractor to certify and have relevant documentation to back up their opinion that there's additional useful life. So something I want to circle back to that Kyle said earlier is talking about the proactive maintenance programs. The communities I've had more success on getting additional time beyond the just 15 years for flat roofs are the ones that I've had more success are the ones that have had those programs where I can show the underwriter, here's 5 years of the last proactive maintenance they've done and everything. So they can show that, they didn't just put a roof on 15 years ago and walk away from it. Now they're addressing any potential issues for the first time. So showing that there's been some tender loving care shown to that roof over the last 5 years has absolutely helped me. I know there was a question in the chat at one point saying, I think there was a 20-year-old roof, what can we do? If it's in good shape, have a roofer come out and take a look at it, general contractor, give the opinion. There's different strategies depending on each association. It's not a one-size-fits-all recommendation that I can throw out there because, say Citizens 15 years for flat roofs, 20 years for asphalt shingle, 30 years for metal, and then somewhere somebody in the government decided concrete tile gets 50. That's more than double what any private market thinks that concrete tiles are going to be good for, but that's the citizens table. So if you're under 50 years in concrete tile, you really all have to do is show them the permit. I've seen agents make mistakes where they go out and get the roof inspection and turn that in instead of just the permit, and you actually get reduced a period of time. So if you had a concrete tile, they do the inspection, they say there's 3 years left, even though it's a 20-year-old roof, Citizens will give you 3 years and then expect the concrete tile. So you got to be really careful and make sure you know what you're doing when you're submitting to Citizens. Now, there are private companies that are still here. There are private companies that are actually coming into Florida for the first time. Each of them have their own preferences, whether it's the type of roof or the height of the building. So again, I really can't just make a blanket recommendation. It should be a conversation between you and your agent of what the appetite and which community or which companies you're going to fit in the box of who's trying to quote and trying to have a strategy of does it make sense and can you get out of Citizens? What can you do there?
So I have two other questions now that we're talking about roofing systems and types of roofs. This is probably going to be Kyle and you, Matt. Do insurance carriers recognize sealants such as Unicoat as solutions that will be viewed favorably? And then can we also talk about spray foam roofing for flat roofs, mid to high-rise residential?
Who wants to go first? You or me, Kyle?
Go ahead.
So,
my head starts spinning right away.
I have a pretty quick one. So, Unicoat, it says coat in it, so I'm going to assume that's a coating. Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong.
Unicoat is actually a company of Southeast United States. They're a company, they're an installer. So they install multiple manufacturers' products depending on the situation. People don't realize that certain coatings are made for certain situations. So,
yeah.
But the question is a coating an option? So
it depends on the company. Lloyd's of London and some of these other private companies have more flexibility on what they'll accept as coatings or as sealants. They're not preferable. At a certain point, it is kind of like putting lipstick on a pig, and then that's a good transition. Good transition to Citizens. And Citizens, even if you have an immaculate roof and the best coating, they had a update that went out about October last year, maybe the year before, saying that the longest they'll give you an additional useful life for any coating is 3 years. And they actually say 1 to 3 years. And I've rarely rarely see them give me 3 years on coating. So I'll give you an example. A client on Palm Beach Island, Citizens has 5 years left of useful life on their traditional roof, and they're asking me, well, we can get another 3 years if we do the coating. No, you're gonna. I think they would actually reduce the amount of useful life once they put a coating on it with Citizens. And again, that's kind of a difficult conversation because it's a moving target. Citizens guidelines seem to change every other month, but the comment I make to a lot of clients is this isn't a static market. Things change all the time, and how companies are going to be handling the different things. So I would just say coatings are not preferable, but depending on the situation, they can be used.
Thank you. Let's talk about foam roofing for flat, high-rise residential buildings.
Okay, do I have a minute to cover what he just said about coatings real quick?
Yep.
I just want people to keep in mind that a coating can be a 20-year warranted coating, and you could have 5 different bids for coating, and one will be a 3-year option, one will be a 25-year option. So once again, be careful about vetting your contractors and them knowing what they're doing. You're look into your warranties again, because if you have a modified granulated cap sheet on your modified roof surface, if it's a built-up roof surface and you're seeing black where everybody walks and all those granules are gone, you stand to reduce the life of your warranty of your system and compromise your warranty. If you look into your warranty, that granular surface, there is no modified bitumen manufacturer anymore in the market that includes that granular surface. It is all a maintenance item by the perspective of and the responsibility of the building owner. And that's the thing where insurance writers they don't count it as, hey, I'll give you a 20 years. Some will give you a 20-year re-roof as long as you pull a permit for it. So the problem is it's always been a maintenance item for warranty, but it doesn't constitute a roof system because it doesn't have a permit. So it gets really complicated, and like I said, case by case, vet your contractors and understand that there's a variance of options in coatings, a wide spectrum, almost more than there is in metal. So getting back to go ahead.
The roofing permit changes everything.
Yeah, and then that makes it a precedent for those who just want to maintain their roof system under warranty. Now they got a full permit for it, so don't be so forceful to force the permit issue. You pretty much, it's one of those things you screwed up for everybody. That's just trying to be proactive and maintain the roof system, because a really good lead blocker in silicone, high quality, 100% solid silicone over a 15-year modified bitumen roof may never need to be replaced again. Here in Florida, it's one of the most durable, most well-sealed underponding water applications you can have, but then your insurance provider is going to determine whether you can keep that or not. The SPF foam and silicone systems, first of all, they do make them with acrylic coatings. There is no possible way for SPF foam to be 100% smooth, so we do not recommend anything other than at least a urethane, at the minimum, a urethane acrylic coating, not just an acrylic. It will not hold up to ponding water. We always recommend silicone over top of the SPF foam. The unique niche in the code for SPF foam, if you already have it, it says that it's telling you have to re-roof. You're thinking you have to rip down 3 inches of foam all the way to the deck and there's not another roof underneath of it. Even if there is another roof underneath of it, SPF foam is the only roof system that you can scare. It's called scarifying. It's like a lawnmower with 20 different crisscrossed circular blades in it. It just mows down the first ½ inch to an inch of that surface and makes it smooth again. Apply another 1 inch of SPF foam and silicone, and that constitutes another roof system. It's the only roof system that you can refurbish and count it and permit it as a roof system without having to you bypass the code that says once you have 2 roofs, you have to remove it all the way to the deck. However, I've seen time and time again where that bottom roof was never should have been foamed over in the first place, and there's recurring moisture underneath it that keeps affecting the SPF foam. So why are you being told you have to re-roof with an SPF foam system? One, you're not maintaining the silicone coating. You compromise the coating, there's damage and bird damage and so on and so forth. And it's infiltrated the foam and it's got moisture in it now. You'll never get it out unless you cut it out. Then once it's over 25% saturated, you do have to tear it all the way off. So, or the insurance company's just telling you have to, or you're having reoccurring blisters on your SPF foam. Some of you may have seen this in your community. It's like it looks like a moon crater. They say the systems are junk. It's not because the system's junk. It's because somebody applied it wrong, or they put it over, or the substrate wasn't properly prepped. And that moisture will fester, and with all the heat here in Florida, it expands, and it causes the foam to expand. Once again, another reason why we don't use acrylic coatings on them, because once it pumps up here, it creates a low spot. The water has to go somewhere, and it's going to sit, and it's going to chew up that coating.
And that's one of the most common roof leaks that I see in condominium mid and high-rise buildings are the blisters, we call them, right? Matt, I do have a question for you. Can we talk about a wind mitigation report requirement for insurance companies for condominium?
So the wind mid is a document that every association should have for each roof. Now, technically, wind mids are only good for 5 years. There's a difference in the commercial line side that I work on versus personal. Even if so let's say you got a 15-year-old roof and a 15-year-old wind mid. As long as that information is still accurate on the commercial side, I can use the older mid as long as I have the pictures. For the companies on the personal line side, they want them done every 5 years. Why the personal line side can't catch up, I'm not sure, but that's there. So the wind mid is going to document what type of roof system is, if there's roof-to-wall connection, is it structurally attached to the roof deck, what kind of opening wind mitigation credits you're going to get with the either Class A or Class B. Something to know is you can get huge discounts on your insurance if you have the Class A opening protection. So that's the full impact or shutter, and it can be a mix and match of both. But every window, every door in the community or in that specific building, if you can get that, you can get a pretty sizable credit depending on which insurance companies you have your policies with today.
Thanks, Matt. Paul, I have one for you. You covered this a little bit. In a multi-condominium association, does the board have to get the consent of the whole membership to change the roofing type, specifically if they're going from tile to metal? Roofing tiles are breaking and they cannot find replacements due to the age.
So that's a really good question because it really touches upon what is a material alteration under 718 for condominiums. Material alteration is anytime you change the common elements to a palpable or perceivable change, meaning paint color, roof tiles to metal. You will have to potentially have a 75% vote unless your documents have something lesser than that for a threshold vote to change from a barrel tile roof to a metal roof. However, there are exceptions to material alteration, and that is for maintenance. It's becoming a little bit more broad in case law. You definitely want to consult with your legal counsel to determine whether or not it is a material alteration, because it is, again, it's a change. Does it fit into the exceptions that would be for maintenance? If you can no longer get those barrel tiles, that's kind of a stretch in a way, I would think. You don't want to face any type of adversity or litigation for the material alteration. So certainly contact legal counsel with that, because I would find it hard to not at least try for the 75% vote to get the 75% vote for material alteration from that type of roof to a metal roof. But there are exceptions to material alterations with respect to maintenance, and especially if the tiles can no longer be found. If you can document that and it's substantial, then your legal counsel will lead you that way. But anytime as a board member, I just want to point this out. Again, you rely upon your experts each and every time that you're going to make a decision when you don't know yourself, whether it's insurance or a roofing vendor, even anyone like a pool vendor, a contractor for your pool. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you making the decisions you're making? Definitely rely upon your experts so that you have that in your minutes and you have made your decisions according to your experts' opinions, including, again, that particular question's great question. Material alterations will come into play when you're changing your roofing style for a condominium.
I have another one for you. This is a really good question. So I deal with this a lot when I'm dealing with roof leaks, specifically in condo. And it's different in townhouses depending on how your documents are written. But I want to talk about penetration points on roofs. So AC units being on roofs. Who's responsible if an AC unit leaks in a condominium, we'll start with, because that's easily defined. And it's a roof penetration point from the HVAC.
So anytime that you have, as an association, as a condominium association, if you have a roof leak, it has caused damage to a unit, know this, first and foremost. The drywall in that unit is almost 100% of the time going to be an association obligation. That does not mean that you contact the unit owner, make a couple calls, leave some voicemails, send a couple emails, and then eventually you go in and call Erin so that she can do the dry out for the drywall. We have a panel on this. I think was a really good one we did a year ago. What do you do with a leak? The first thing as an association, condominium association, that you do, and sometimes in a townhome situation, depending on where it originates, is you enter and you dry out the drywall. That is your obligation as an association. You don't wait to contact the owner. Maybe they'll call you back. You've knocked a few times. They haven't answered. The right of entry is there for you, and you need to enter and start the remediation process for that. Most likely, if it's a casualty event, certainly. If it's a leak from a unit above, an adjacent unit, again, certainly the association will go in and dry out the unit. Sometimes cut the drywall immediately and continue to dry out, but that is an association obligation. That is one of the most common mistakes that my board or even managers make for condos.
Thank you for reiterating what I say every day. As soon as the association finds out that there is a problem, they must act. It's not always your financial responsibility at the end of the day, but we don't care about that when water happens. Water is always an emergency. Stopping the bleed and making sure we're drying it out immediately so there's no secondary damages. And for us here in Florida, that's mold. Mold grows within 24 to 72 hours. So the longer that you wait to potentially dry out a unit, the bigger the bill gets and the more dry out time is required if we can even dry out after 3-4 days. So
right.
Thank you for reiterating that.
Yeah, and you pointed out, if it's the unit owner or Bob's issue, I use bad examples because I think people remember them. If you have someone, and Katie's not here because I always use her as like my bad example. If Katie drinks too much red wine that night and gets into her jacuzzi tub but overflows it, then that water obviously is going downstairs, down to the unit below. That is Katie's problem. We know what she did, right? And we're going to go after Katie when we have the time to do so. But in the meantime, immediately we're drying the unit out. Then we're going after Katie and her red wine. She's not here to defend herself, Erin, so you'll have to defend her.
I got you. It's always cheaper to mitigate than it is to remediate. And mitigation is what you're obligated to in your insurance policy if you're filing a claim. But you're always going to want to do that whether you're filing the claim or not. It doesn't matter either way. You must act when it is an emergency, and water is always an emergency. We have a lot more questions in here that are really good, but we are over our time right now, and I do want to be respectful of everybody's time, so I will make sure that all these questions go to the respective person expert on this panel, and we'll be all sending you guys an email to help that. But in the meantime, we will all be putting our information into the group chat. You can feel free to email us directly with specific association needs. And I would like to say thank you all for joining us today. On behalf of myself and this panel, I had a great time with you guys. So, thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. On behalf of myself and this panel, I had a great time with you guys. So, thank you so much, and I hope you all.
Recording stopped.
Perfect. I'll send you guys the recording after this as well, so you can send it to your people, and we can put it on our channels as well.
Thank you, Erin.
Anytime. Don't forget to put your information in the group chat. I'll leave it open for a few minutes.
Oh.